7 weeks before leaving to climb Everest, or Chomolungma as it's called in Tibetan, I took a fall while I was skiing and I fully tore my ACL. And through that and through other challenges that I've had in life, whether it's working on climate advocacy or going to climb and ski big mountains, I've learned that it's important to embrace challenge. So today I'm going to share some stories from the roof of the world and this philosophy that I've developed, this sort of feminine approach to leadership. And throughout my career, people are always like, how do you overcome the challenges? How do you overcome fear? How do you overcome your demons? And what I've really learned is that I don't ever really overcome any of these things. Instead, when I can embrace them, learn to love them, learn to make my wounds into my greatest gifts, that's when I'm able to truly succeed. And so this idea overcome is really kind of based in this colonialist domination mentality. Overcome, to get the better of, surmount, to gain superiority, win, to overwhelm, or to conquer. It implies there's a winner and a loser. And instead, I like to think about embrace, to clasp in the arms, to hug, cherish love, to take up especially readily or gladly, to avail oneself of, welcome, to take in or include as a part, item, or element of a more inclusive whole. And I kind of feel this is more rooted in this feminine idea of not conquering, but embracing and loving. And so my climb for Everest, I decided to do it as a climb for equality, to talk about disrupting implicit bias, to celebrate femininity and the leadership qualities that go with it, and to really focus on decolonizing the way we talk about women, nature, and mountains. And so as I was preparing for Everest, I learned that only 10% of the climbers on 8,000 meter peaks are women. And despite the gains we've seen for women in many areas of society, when we look at who's at the top, we still see a lack of equal representation. So that was my goal. And my name is Caroline Gleich. I'm a professional ski mountaineer, environmental activist. I've been a sponsored athlete for about 2 decades. And when I've told people about the dreams I had of climbing and skiing the biggest mountains in the world, I was always met with skepticism. You can't see my stature right now, but I stand at about 5 feet 2 inches. I've always told, you're too small and delicate. You're not strong enough. You don't really have the look of a mountaineer in your eyes like Jeremy Jones or Tommy Caldwell. They told me my dreams were impossible and that they'd either humor me or a lot of people told me I would die trying. And I share this with you because when we talk about big, ambitious climate goals, people say it's impossible. But I'm here to tell you that we can't listen to what anyone else says about what we're capable of when it comes to climbing mountains or acting on climate change. I do what people tell me is impossible, and you can too. And so throughout my work, I've had an opportunity to do a lot of lobbying and advocacy with organizations like Protect Our Winters and the Conservation Alliance, the American Alpine Club, many others. I feel a big duty to give back and make sure that we protect the mountains and these experiences in our planet for future generations. And I make my living really grateful to work with socially and environmentally responsible brands like Patagonia, Cliff Bar. I'm really conscientious about the brands that I work with, and I want to make sure that they do the best they can to minimize the impact on people and the planet. So this year is my 10-year anniversary as a Patagonia and Cliff Bar ambassador, and it's been a really fun journey building my career as a professional ski mountaineer. And so basically, for as long as I can remember, this is what I wanted to do, to climb and ski the biggest mountains in the world. And I always had a dream of going to the Himalayas. And so I built my skills on smaller mountains around the world, here in the Cordillera Blanca of Peru, in the French Alps, among many other places. And I saw a lot firsthand the effects of climate change and also the impacts of fossil fuel burning on public health in the pollution in the valleys below. So that's part of what led me to become a climate activist. So when I've been tackling these big goals and challenges, what I've learned about embracing challenge is that 3 lessons. 1, we have deeper reserves than we think. 2, It's not how you get knocked down, it's how you get back up. And 3, set big goals. Choose challenge to smile when it gets hard. We have deeper reserves than we think. I learned this on an expedition to climb Cho-Yu, the 6th highest peak in the world, in 2018. This was actually some of the advice that our high altitude doctor, Monica Pires, gave me. So Mount Cho-Yu, it's 26,906 feet. It's located in Tibet. It's the 6th highest peak in the world, and it was a challenge I'd been dreaming about for almost 2 decades. And so I take my training very seriously. So to train for the demands of such high altitude, we would load up our backpacks with heavy weights, whether it was rocks, water jugs, sometimes our friends' kids. It was a great way to multitask. And on September 6th, we arrived at Cho-Yu Base Camp at 16,400 feet. And one of the interesting things about Tibet and climbing from Tibet and China is that they've actually paved the road all the way to base camp. And so it's basically like car camping, except you're at 16,000 feet. And looking up at the mountain, only 10,000 feet more to go, which, we could do in a single day pretty easily, except the demands of the altitude. This was my first time going above 7,000 meters. And I was born and raised in Minnesota. And so altitude has always been something that I've struggled with. I went into the trip with a deep respect for the demands of the high altitude. And arriving at Cho-Yu Advanced Base Camp at 18,700 feet, I didn't feel really as well as I had hoped. I really was struggling with the altitude. And over the course of the next several days, I became increasingly sick and affected by the altitude. And after 4 days, the team, we determined that I was beginning to show the early signs of high altitude pulmonary edema, or HAPE, which is one of the leading causes of death for high altitude mountaineers. And it was one of the most scary experiences of my life. I really couldn't breathe. Every breath was a struggle. I couldn't get out of the tent. In the last hours before I went on supplemental oxygen, I couldn't even pee. I felt like my kidneys were shutting down. And so after working with the team and talking about a plan, we determined that I needed to go down as quickly as possible to base camp. And so I had to take a bunch of different emergency high altitude medicines, including, fun fact, Viagra. Viagra is used to treat high altitude pulmonary edema. So I took all these medications and I had to walk down through Advanced Base Camp in front of a bunch of different teams of international climbers. And being one of the only women there and being one of the smallest people, I couldn't help but feeling like I was failing for all women. Like I carried this extra burden and I was so depressed and so ashamed. And so being back at base camp, I was just terrified. I really learned, we never conquer these places. We're merely granted passage. And as much as I wanted to try to put this behind me, I was so fearful. On top of that, because of the effects of all the medication I had taken, I wasn't able to eat or drink for 4 days. I had horrible acid reflux and I was just dry heaving on the ground. And so I was shocked when our team and our high altitude doctor determined after 4 days that they thought I was recovered well enough to go back up the mountain. And I had this really candid conversation with the high altitude doctor, Monica Pires, and I said, Monica, I'm so depleted, there's no way I can go back up. And she said, you can do it. We have deeper reserves than we think. And that is a mantra I now take with me for every mountain I climb, every challenge I embark on, and especially for my environmental advocacy. And so after 4 days of recovering, without eating or drinking, I went back up to Cho-Yu Advanced Base Camp. And lo and behold, this time I felt a little bit better. And after a few days, we went to Camp 1 and touched Camp 1 at 21,000 feet, which was at that point the highest that I'd ever been. And again, I was just shocked that I felt better. As much as I wanted to try to put that experience with the altitude behind me, instead I embraced it and I owned it and I made it part of my story. So after a few more days and nights and rotations, we woke up for our summit push, 11:30 p.m. wake up, a 1 a.m. start. And seeing that sunrise at 26,000 feet is a moment I'll never forget. Just being surrounded by this magical glow. And again, bringing that philosophy of embracing these challenges, I just tried to open my heart to the experience and love every moment of it as much as I could. And on the summit of Cho-Yu, I dropped down on one knee and I asked my partner, Robert James Lee, will you marry me? And we got engaged on the summit of Cho-Yu with Everest in the background. And so the big peak right behind me is Everest, or Chomolungma or Sagarmatha. Those are the traditional names for it, the Tibetan and the Nepali. And so while we were driving to Cho-Yu, I got my first glimpse of Everest. And from the moment I saw it, it spoke to me in a big way. And I just felt in my heart a deep calling. I was like, I really want to climb that. Love to ski it. And we put the wheels in motion to plan a trip to go back. And on that next phase of this story, I learned that it's not how you get knocked down, it's how you get back up. Because you're going to get knocked down a million times, hundreds of times in 100 different ways. And you just got to expect it and be prepared, be willing to own it and keep going forward. So on February 25th, 2019, after months of fundraising, digging so deep to gather the resources to make this trip a reality, I made the final non-refundable, non-transferable payment to climb Everest Chomolungma in the spring. The very next day, February 26th, I was on a film shoot. It was the very last turn of the day, and I caught a weird edge in some wind-affected snow, and I started to tumble. And midway through the tumble, I heard a pop in my knee, and I instantly knew that I had torn my ACL. This was 7 weeks before my Everest departure. And I had these moments of tears, and I just had a moment of complete desperation and depression. And then after giving myself some space to grieve, I just was like, how can I embrace this? How can I turn this struggle into a gift? And how can I wear this scar and this wound with pride? How can I go forward? So it was confirmed through MRI. There was a fully torn ACL. One doctor said, hey, it might be okay to go to Everest. The orthopedic surgeon was not as optimistic, but between a team of doctors and our expedition leadership, we decided I could put off my surgery to try to complete my climb and then have the ACL reconstruction surgery when I get home. But in my mind, I was freaking out in a lot of ways because I was 6 weeks out from one of the biggest trips of my life, and I could barely complete a rotation on the bike. So I just had to remember to take it one step at a time. And through the course of the next 6 weeks, with the help of the PT and a bunch of other people, I was able to build my knee. I was able to learn to use my knee without the ACL. And I ran a 5K. I did some other training. And on April 20th, we packed up with everything except for the ACL in my left knee. And we made our way to Tibet. And again, I just tried to bring with me that reverence for nature and that idea of embracing this challenge and also just taking one step at a time, because I had no idea how my knee was going to react to being at altitude. And I had no idea how it was going to swell or not swell or feel as I got to these increasingly higher altitudes. So after about a week of travel, we made it to base camp at 17,000 feet on the north side of Everest Chomolungma in Tibet. And after another week, we made it to advanced base camp at 21,000 feet. And again, I was just having that experience that I had before on Cho-Yu. I was just constantly checking in with myself to make sure that I was being honest about what my knee and my lungs and my body was capable of. But I've also learned with these things, you have to celebrate every little benchmark along the way. So here we are reaching Camp 1 at 23,000 feet, having a moment of celebration. And up there, you really feel the fragility of human life because the wind and the cold, you're out there, and it really gives you a deep respect and reverence for nature. So Camp 2, 25,000 feet, some of the most beautiful sunsets and sunrises of my life. We spent 2 nights up there waiting for some of the teams to pass and the crowds to blow out because we did not want to go on a crowded day. And just feeling that fragility and the vulnerability of human life there, it just made me really think about how we need to decolonize the way that we think and talk about mountains. And these words like conquer and bag, they're based in a colonial mentality. And so at these altitudes, I was not conquering. I was barely living. And it just gives you a big respect, seeing that physical and mental fragility. And so heading up to Camp 3, from Camp 3, it was time to go to the summit. And so making our way to the summit, bringing that respect and making sure that I brought that attitude of not having the mountain be something that I exploit for my personal gain. I'm not out to defile or disrespect these places that I visit. And so bringing that leave no trace attitude and making the way up higher. And one of the cool things about the expedition is that our guide, we were guided and we were climbing with Carla Perez, who's the first South American woman to climb Everest without oxygen. And so being with Carla, being with a lot of women on our team, it was just a wonderful feeling to be moving up the Chomolungma, mother goddess of the universe. And at 7:30 a.m., we made it to the summit, 29,029 feet. And there was a moment of joy, but then a reminder like, hey, we got to really check in, make sure we have reserves to get down. And I was really worried about the down with my knee because I knew that was where I could feel the most unstable. So I was just taking it one step at a time, checking in, and just remembering how far I still really had to go. So after about 12 hours, we made it off the fixed lines, off the steep slopes. We could take a deep breath, take it all in, and really just embrace every moment of the challenge. And so 4 days after I got home from Everest, I went under the knife to have my ACL reconstruction, which I knew meant I would be starting again from square one, but it was worth it to me to be able to climb the mountain, to be able to see what we saw. And so what I've really learned from all of these things is to choose these hard challenges, to smile when it gets hard. And I know that sounds cliche, like some sort of toxic positivity, but researchers at Ulster University and Swansea University, they asked a group of 24 runners to wear a breathing mask to measure oxygen consumption and then complete 4 6-minute running blocks on a treadmill while smiling or frowning. And the study, which was recently published in Psychology of Sport and Exercise, it found that the runners who smiled more used less oxygen, they ran more economically, and had a lower perceived rate of exertion than those who frowned and those in the control group. And so with that, I have a short video, it's about 7 minutes long, that shows in moving picture some of the challenges that I embraced with this Everest journey. And so it does show the fall that caused my ACL tear. So just putting the trigger warning out there. My family, I don't really like to watch the video, but I also want to own my truth and my reality. So with that said, we'll check out this video. I've been training for this climb my whole life. This is what happened and this is my reality. It's just not the story I want to tell. In April 2019, I'm going to climb Mount Everest. We're calling it a climb for equality. Only 11% of people who've climbed Everest are women. That 11% is really similar to the female Fortune 500 CEOs or Hollywood directors. When you look at who's at the top, you still see an absence of women. There's not equal opportunity. Over the course of my career, it's been very difficult for me to find technical ski mountaineering gear in my size. For instance, 8,000 meter boots start at a size 39, which is a women's 8. So if you're a woman's 5, you're gonna be climbing in boots that are 3 sizes too big. It also has a huge psychological effect. You just instantly feel like you're not welcome, you don't belong. It took me a long time to feel that it was acceptable to be who I really am. You don't train to climb a mountain like Everest in 2 or 3 months. This is a lifelong process. building my skills on smaller mountains across the world. But to prepare my body, I'm sleeping in a hypoxico tent every night at an increasingly higher altitude. At 8,000 meters, you're operating at a really reduced capacity. Basic motor skills, everything is all decreased. So I'll weigh my backpack down with water or rocks, go up a couple thousand feet, and be out for 12 to 15-hour days, climbing up and skiing down. For the past 8 years of my life, I've been training for Everest. It gives you a real sense of power and capability. But then you feel the fragility of life. How quickly things can go wrong. Hearing my knee pop, it was just a sickening feeling. Like instantly I started to panic. I just knew. I just thought my whole life was over. I wasn't gonna be able to go to Everest. I would lose all my money in sponsorships, and I was gonna go into financial ruin because of this stupid little fall.
Do you have any pain here?
A little bit on
On this side.
right there. I mean, this is seriously probably one of my worst nightmares, to have a knee injury. But you get beat up a million times in a million different ways. Sometimes you have to accept what life hands you.
In 7 weeks, you recover well enough that is considered safe to go up there, maybe with a hinge brace or something.
Right.
But you don't want to have a knee that start to swell up or bother you when you're up on top of the Everest.
I tore my ACL. This is what happened, and this is my reality. It's just not the story I want to tell. I could still climb Everest, and that's my goal right now, is to heal. In less than 6 weeks, I leave for Everest. All my energy is just going to icing, keeping the swelling down. I have Everest to focus on to keep my mind occupied, just taking it one day at a time. I'm pretty stubborn and headstrong, so if there's anyone who can do it, it's me. I want to see more women getting to the top. It's really hard. So painful. And I just feel really sick in my stomach and really scared. Moving. Slowly. And looking down. 24,500 feet.
Pretty amazing.
Oh my gosh. Looks like we might make a huge push for the summit tomorrow. Oh my God, it's been such a crazy trip. With every step of the journey, there was a lot of anxiety. I had to learn how to use my leg without an ACL and to acclimatize. It's just the worst kind of pain and suffering. But Everest pushes you to use everything you've got. It brings out the best parts of the human spirit. It's just a lifelong achievement. So with that said, going forward, whether it comes to climbing mountains or setting big, ambitious climate goals, to choose ambitious goals and to embrace, don't overcome the hard challenges along the way. Thank you very much.